Hello and welcome to the European Report in this special edition from the heart of the European Union in the European Parliament. And in today's programme we'll be discussing what the European Union is doing to confront the evil that is Jew hatred. And my guests today include Katharina von Schnurbein, the EU Coordinator for Combating Anti-Semitism. So it's a pleasure to have you on the programme.
Pleasure to be here.
Including Tomas Sandell, the founder and director of the European Coalition for Israel and co-sponsors of this programme, and also Arne, Gericke, German MEP and part of the European Conservative and Reformist Group. So welcome to the programme. I'll first off start off with you, Katharina. It's an absolute pleasure for us to have you join us on today's programme to discuss this very important topic of Jew hatred. Can you tell us about what your role involves? Because you were appointed to this position by the European Commission back in December of 2015. And also, what have you learnt during your time in this very important role?
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. The role was created following a colloquium that we had in 2015 on anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim hatred, where it became very clear that a political will is there clearly on European level and also on the level of the member states to attack anti-Semitism in a much more direct way. So my role has been to outreach to Jewish communities across Europe. I've been traveling a lot to meet with Jewish leaders, with Jewish students, with representatives of the various organizations, to listen to them and to report back in a direct way to First Vice President Timmermans at the European Commission and Commissioner Jourova, who are responsible for this and who also appointed me. And that, as a consequence, we have then initiated certain policy steps now, and I will be talking about them probably in the course of this program. But the idea is really to see that Jews in Europe, 75 years this year after the Wannsee Conference, and over 75 years after the end of the Second World War, again live in fear in Europe. They are thinking about leaving Europe. It's a catastrophe. And I think that this is our main aim, to ensure that Jews feel they have a future in Europe, that they recommend to their children to stay here rather than to leave, and that we do everything in our power to ensure that this security can be given.
And Tomas, the issue of Jew hatred as well as Holocaust education is one of your passions, and it's one of the coring values and one of the reasons you founded ECI in the first place. Maybe you can identify some areas that the European Commission and the EU and its institutions could really tackle this growing problem of anti-Semitism in Europe that we're seeing today.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. It's good to be back on the program and be in such good company. Speaking about Holocaust remembrance and ECI, I always go back to 2005 when we had the privilege and honor to initiate and organize the first Holocaust Remembrance Day event here in the European Parliament, which is still something that we look back on with great pride. Also the cooperation with the European institutions, including the European Parliament, has been very fruitful. And I think that we should never underestimate the power of political institutions such as the European Parliament and the European Commission in really shaping policy through initiatives such as establishing an annual Holocaust Remembrance Day event here in the European Parliament, now also in the Commission, but also I think, which was really significant, the appointment of Katharina von Schnurbein in December 2015 to have a coordinator who would work full-time on raising awareness of the threats of anti-Semitism. So that is to say that obviously this is a multifaceted issue that we are dealing with, but working together, civil society groups such as ours with the political institutions, including governments, is something where we can show a united front against anti-Semitism, and by doing so also sending a clear message to the Jewish communities in Europe to say that, listen, you belong here, Europe would not be the same without you. And when I say those very words, I think I'm quoting the first Vice President Franz Timmermans and Federica Mogherini in a different setting. So we are very pleased with this partnership.
Excellent. And Arne, it's a real pleasure to have you back on the European Report. So Happy New Year for 2017. Now, you're a German MEP, and we know that successive German governments after World War II have done so much to build relations with the Jewish community and also tackle the issue of anti-Semitism. Can you share with us what the German government has done in order to tackle the problem of anti-Semitism? Because today, Germany is one of Israel's greatest friends in Europe.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here again in the European Parliament. I think it's very important to always put up signs that Israel is also wanted and respected, and also the Jews are invited to be in Europe. And regarding Germany, I think Germany has learned the lesson of history and steps against every sort of anti-Semitism. That's anyway a wish that I would have too. And I think it's very important to always have signs put up which show that we are very friendly against Israel, and we are good friends of Israel in Europe or also worldwide if issues come up. Yeah? Still, we notice that there is a rising number of anti-Semitic crime coming up also in Germany. And this is something, of course, which should not be named too hard, because sometimes it's, if you push it up too much, it's supporting this sort of crime. So, but it's good to know that our Jewish friends are not safe. They live in fear, as you just mentioned. And so if we don't always see them. Surely, we had it here in Parliament already now mentioned that children go to kindergarten already, have a guard in front of the kindergarten. And this is something not everybody knows or notices, that here is a special form of fear, whether they notice it as fear or not. But I think this is a point we have to notice, and we only notice if we come together. I think regarding Germany in general now, there is also a fear of the new extreme parties regarding the rights with their propaganda. Is not really anti-Semitic in a way. It's more generally against religious thinking and so. But I think pretty sure there is also anti-Semitic thoughts hidden, and this is not much better. I think that's can be even worse. So regarding the extreme right or the extremes, I think this is becoming not only a German problem, or hasn't been only a German problem, but it's something which is becoming a European problem. And so I think it is very important that we meet here and make it a European issue regarding about that. So in this European Parliament, it's extremely important to come up also from the German side to indicate, hey, we have our roots, we have our lessons from history, and we don't want anything like that to happen, and we don't like anything like that to be thought. And so regarding that, the politics with anti-Semitic messages here in the Parliament are not allowed to have a ground, a future, or whatever. And it's really important to work for positive signs for Israel, for our Jewish partners here.
Excellent, very reassuring.
Simon, could I mention as the non-German on the panel that I think
well, not on the panel.
We are very proud of the outgoing President Martin Schulz, who said in his first speech after having been nominated president, he said, my first responsibility as a president of the European Parliament is to stand up for the safety of the Jewish people. And I think that is something that he has stood up to a large extent. So I just want, as a non-German, to recognize these very good contributions that you also brought forward.
Yeah. And Katharina, sadly the Jewish community has been rocked over the last couple of years. Firstly, with the horrendous terrorist attack that took place here in Brussels on the Jewish Museum, in which 4 Jewish people were murdered by ISIS, confounded by what happened almost 2 years ago, the terrorist attack against the Jewish kosher supermarket and the Charlie Hebdo attack that we saw in Paris. And the Jewish community across Europe are asking questions, as well as the Israeli government. Is there a future for European Jewry in the light of this rise of anti-Semitism? And what is the Commission doing to put policies in place that will protect and secure the Jewish communities across Europe?
Yes, yes, indeed. This is exactly, I think, the horrific backdrop against which we are up to. I think one thing is very clear, that it starts with the Jews, but Absolutely. It doesn't stop there. We have seen that the attacks and the insecurity is now felt in society at large. Therefore, also anti-Semitism is not a responsibility to be fought by the Jews. It's a responsibility to be fought by society at large. And there is a very strong political will to address this. So in my conversation with the Jewish community in the past year, one thing that came out strongly is anti-Semitism on the internet, because many see that actually a lot of the horrific attacks started or originated on the internet, on platforms. So what we have initiated in May, and we had discussions beforehand obviously with IT companies, is a code of conduct by which they agree to revise and remove within 24 hours all illegal hate speech that is flagged to them according to European legislation. Because we have a situation whereby the terms of service usually correspond to American legislation, where freedom of speech is regulated differently. In Europe, incitement to hatred and violence is criminalized. So what is illegal in the real world is also illegal online. And on that basis, we have started this cooperation with IT companies. We work closely with NGOs who actually monitor and report. And we see first positive signs of the fact that things are removed quicker, not yet quick enough, and there could be a much better rate in reporting if we used algorithms, and so we have to move this forward, but it was one response and one concrete policy that we started. Another important issue is that we really enforce legislation that is already there. We have, since 2008, European legislation that criminalizes Holocaust denial, inciting to violence. Only 13 and now 15 member states have transposed this correctly up until now. So we are working with member states to ensure that they upgrade and enforce their legislation, which also means training policemen, training prosecutors, and ensuring that legislation is actually understood and applied. Another thing we have started doing, but not only since December, but we have actually been working on anti-Semitism, fighting anti-Semitism, also together with the government of Israel for 10 years, because we had the 10th anniversary of our annual seminar this year, is to finance grassroots projects in a better way, to ensure that Jewish organizations, for example, can also do better coalition building. One project we funded was between the European Union of Jewish Students and the Armenians and the Roma community. All three communities have experienced genocide in Europe. All three of them are diaspora, and they can speak up for each other as well. So they found this project very rewarding. And it's this kind of course, small-scale projects, but I think very important to increase awareness and to boost also the self-esteem. and this is something we want to continue. Obviously, another important issue in that context is also to finance all activities concerning remembrance. We have 3.2 million allocated per year to finance projects that will look, and we had one, for example, in the Czech Republic about the neighbors that disappeared, school projects where students nowadays go out and look at what actually happened in their neighborhood. So these kind of, I think, projects that will change their perception forever if it's done well.
Yeah, I just want to draw back to something you said, which is very important, and that's the issue of social media. Have you been able to place any pressure on the likes of Google, of Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram as well, that are carrying these anti-Semitic
Yes, actually, I should have mentioned it. The code of conduct that we concluded is with Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and YouTube.
Fantastic.
So,
very good.
They respond. Obviously, you know, this is work in progress, and we need to see also. And by the way, this does not only concern anti-Semitic hate speech. I mean, we see now with fake news, with other hate news that is out there and is being actively created. Again, it started with the Jews, but it doesn't stop there. And so we have to tackle this on a very broad scale and in a holistic way.
Excellent. And Arne, I know that you're such a strong supporter of Israel here in the European Parliament. What do you think the European Parliament can do to tackle this growing issue of Jew hatred in Europe? And what roles in particular can MEPs like yourself play in this very important fight for not only the Jewish community, but for the future security and well-being of Europe?
My impression is that just putting it up as an issue, Israel and the subject anti-Semitism or so, we notice as parliamentarians that we're not a very small group. There are quite a few who are going into that direction, and it's something where I say Israel is repeatedly on the agenda, but it's forced on us, and I think we have to learn to put it up by our own, that we make it a subject in a positive way in the Parliament. And this is something which I experienced end of last year, and it's just fascinating to see how many people are active as friends of Israel, and how young how young Jews, now in this case from Germany, put up the subject and look, they say, this is our home place, we want to stay here, but please help us to open the doors, build bridges, and not give so much room to the anti-Semitic propaganda. And so I think this is something which can grow in both ways. We can influence from Europe onto the country level and just open doors and build bridges by relating to facts and not letting too many negative rumors come up, rumors which can be put up by whatever media, which transports a lot of wrong news. Yeah? So what we have to do is just put more and more, oppose more and more the anti-Israel proposals, amendments and speeches which are held and come in to the European Parliament. That's what we can do here. What I find also important is to show the flag of Israel here in our house. If we meet together with people from the Knesset or groups who are interested in Israel, why don't we show the flag? And then again, it's a huge international network. There is already support for Jews in Israel, and this is something which is growing also here in the Parliament. So even though we have a strong opposition coming up and not really relating to facts, but putting things out of balance in Israel, but also here in Europe, we have to, I think, just be sure that we're not alone, that we can stand up for Israel, for the Jews here in Europe and Germany. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And Thomas, isn't the problem of anti-Semitism so multifaceted that it's so difficult to confront? I mean, previously we saw this came from the Nazis, from the fascists and the far right. Now we're seeing that the left is anti-Semitic in its views and attitudes towards Israel, and of course then we're seeing this growing Islamic extremism really showing this real hatred of Jewish people, and that's why in any terror attack the Jewish people are attacked. In what way can education play a major role in confronting this?
It's interesting. I recall in one of our Holocaust Remembrance Day events years back when the Czech Commissioner Jan Fiegel spoke. Slovak, sorry, yes. He raised the point how important education is, because we have a large constituency in Europe at the moment who don't feel perhaps part of European history, who don't share perhaps also the responsibility or the shame that I think we all do who have you know, generations going back in Europe or Germany. And therefore I think it's very important that this is being taught on every level in a school curriculum, that even those say who came from North Africa, and we know there are many of them, that they can get the facts straight and feel the same responsibility as we do. If I turn it around a little bit, I think for European Coalition for Israel, we're a Christian organization, and for us it's very important always to say that, listen, what happened 75 years ago, it didn't happen in a Muslim context, it didn't happen in a you know, in a leftist context. It happened in what we would consider to be Christian Europe, and you know, quite high culture and sophisticated. So when we speak out as Christians, we are speaking out of a sense of responsibility to say, well, we have a responsibility to be the first ones to stand up today. So we can't point fingers to others. But at the same time, I think we have a responsibility to, as Katharina said as well, that this education will be taught in every school throughout Europe, and there should be no-go zones where this should be a taboo subject. And that's of course a very difficult task to present it in a way that we don't stigmatize anyway, but just present it as a part of European history that none of us want to see repeated.
Absolutely. Sadly, we've got only 3 minutes left of the programme. Katharina, can I ask you two questions, as double question? The first thing is, there is a problem of anti-Semitism on the left. There is a problem of anti-Semitism now with the far right as well. But the growing problem is the rise of Islamic extremism, whether it's because of political correctness or fear. There is an impression from the Jewish community that this is not being confronted and tackled, because this is where the most violent attacks come from against the Jewish community. What is being done to confront this? And secondly, my other question linked to this is, why hasn't the European Union adopted the new working definition of anti-Semitism that the British government has, that suggests that any attack on Israel that claims that Israel has no right to exist is anti-Semitic?
So to start with your last question, the European Commission doesn't have a mechanism to adopt legally non-binding definitions. So therefore we cannot adopt it as such. However, it has been adopted by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance this year. It was adopted by the UK government. In the OSCE process, in an attempt to adopt it, there was an EU common position. And we see that several governments have started using it in their data collection, in their work with the communities, that NGOs use it to explain it. So I think the most important issue is really that it is being used, and we welcome every tool that will help define anti-Semitism better and fight it. And therefore, I mean, actually, we reinitiated the whole process in January, when we first brought together the special envoys on fighting anti-Semitism from across Europe. So there is a clear political will also. On the second issue, so I think we have to be careful not to stigmatize. Obviously, Islamist extremists need to be treated with the full force of law, with the terrorism countermeasures that we have stepped up significantly here on European level. They need to be monitored on the internet, all these actions that we have now introduced and reinforced police cooperation between member states, police and so on. But then on the other side, we have a Muslim population that lives among us and is not violent and wants to belong. And I think this is where we have a chance with education, because they come from a background where there's not much talk about the Holocaust, for example, where there's no understanding of European history and the role that the Holocaust played in European history. And therefore, I think it's very important to start the narrative by relating it to them. Have you experienced discrimination? Do you know what it means? And can you see where it has led to in the past? And let that happen again. So I think it's important in that way, and by explaining it in a way that can be a relation towards their own experiences, we will then end up in a situation where we can also discuss a lot of other values in a much broader context.
We come to the end of the programme, but Katharina, I'd like to say that thank you for the excellent work that you're doing in confronting the rise of Jew hatred in Europe, and that you have all of our support here. And I know that many Jewish people watching this programme, together with many Christians that love Israel and the Jewish people, will feel very much reassured by what you've said. So thank you for being our special guest, and thank you, Arne, for being on the programme as well, and Tomas Sandell. And we just want to thank you for watching today's European report. The issue of Jew hatred is a problem that affects the whole of Europe, and this is why it's so important that if we are to preserve European freedom and liberty, then we confront the evil that is anti-Semitism. So thank you for watching today's programme.